Hey, hello everybody. Welcome to tonight's Wireside chat. And Melissa and I are super pleased to have our guest, Ellen Phillips, who is, what is your official title at SNHU, Ellen?
I'm the Director of Open Educational Resources and Intellectual Property. I also oversee the archives.
You're the archivist.
Yeah, I am.
How cool is that?
Yeah, we got a lot of really interesting things that anybody who's going to be around graduation weekend, you'll see them in the library. I'm putting together a display. So, yeah, but I mostly work with copyright and intellectual property, the open educational resources, which are like those free textbooks that you hear a lot about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're trying to reduce costs for students.
Well, I thought it would be a great idea to have you join us because copyright is such an essential part of what we do as writers, as creative writers. It's such a key element of our careers, and yet it's also an area that's kind of shrouded in mystery and fear. It's like a lot of people really don't understand. I'm speaking for myself as a professional writer. I know there are areas of copyright law that I do not understand and that I should understand. So I guess before, rather than just kind of pepper you with a million questions, I'm just going to kind of turn it over to you and ask you, like, what do writers need to know about copyright?
So I think a really good beginning point to know about copyright is that you don't have to register your works to have protection in them. So they just have to be fixed in a tangible medium is actually how the wording of the law is. So anytime you like type anything down, you jot down some notes about your characters that you're going to include in your novel. That starts you've started like a copyright in your own work. Obviously, if you're going to develop that into like a whole novel, you don't have, it's not fully fleshed out at that point. And the other thing to know about that is you don't have to register your work to get copyright, but you also can't copyright an idea. So if we all came up with the same plot, right, all of our works would look kind of different, but we would all have our own copyrights in them. I could not say copyright the idea of a murder mystery. Now I could have, like, if you copied something of mine, you took some very specific characters, if you borrowed like mannerisms of speech, if you described their manner of dress the same way that I described mine, with some of the same background settings, then it might be an infringement. But otherwise, you can't copyright an idea. You can't copyright a fact. Just because you put hard work into something that is not, it's about originality and not like your hard work that went into making a copy or something of a work.
And I
So
believe
yeah.
that's more or less why you can't copyright a title.
Yeah, it's not unique enough,
Yeah.
generally speaking, to copyright it. Now, what you could do though, if you say had something that was very, very unique in the title, and you were a very successful, widely published author, you might trademark. If the title was actually almost like your tagline and could be like sort of thought of as a logo, not a logo, uh, like a slogan
Mm-hmm.
to describe your work, you could consider trademarking it, or any like particular graphics that went along with it. Like I'm thinking of like a Stephen King novel where
Right.
some of like the graphics would be trademarked and would be definitely developed with an eye towards like how is that logo going to be used, and how are the different creative elements within a work, they're going to be parceled out with different types of licensing agreements.
And I
Um,
assume that, I mean, just thinking, like if you have the name of one of your characters in your title, like Harry Potter, for example, then that is a copyrightable. That title would fall under copyright. I couldn't call my book Harry Potter, right? I'd have to call him Larry Botter or something
Exactly.
like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Uh, so let me go into the chat here because there is one question that kind of is a response to something you mentioned. This is from Kat Fox, who wonders, um, but you do need to register your work to achieve copyright protections if you pursue legal action. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah. So if you find that somebody's been infringing your work, first and foremost, like you probably want to send, like, you might consider, take note of what they're doing, right? Start to keep a record of where you see your work showing up with that's been used without your permission. You definitely want to register it before you can bring a claim under the federal Copyright Act. You definitely need to have it registered.
And that is something that you can do, that anyone can do through the Library of Congress. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, there's a self-service portal, and I think it's up to 10 works you can register at once for. I forget what the fee is. It's not
Hmm.
much. It's like it's less than $200, I want to say, for
So
10 works.
here's a hypothetical that I think preys upon the mind of writers. So let's say that I'm sitting down at my computer or in front of my notebook and I'm jotting down, I'm writing chapter one of my masterpiece. The instant my pen touches the page, what I have written there is protected by copyright. But let's say that somehow or another somebody is looking over my shoulder and they are also recording what I have written and they are able to publish it first. How does my kind of theoretical copyright protection actually protect me in that instance? How can I possibly prove that copyright did in fact, adhere in what I had written rather than what was published first?
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't really know exactly how you would protect against that,
Hmm.
other than keeping detailed notes. So, for example, if you had kept a journal and you had written some of these ideas down in there like months ago or years ago, you might be able to show, in a courtroom setting that you had um, already started formulating the creative elements of your work. Now, but like I said, if the other work, if they just saw like a slight, hint of what the story was, and then they developed one around it,
Right. That's
that
not going to be protected.
no, it might not be, because they would be going on to build off of your idea. Um, it's plagiarism for sure.
Hmm.
But it's kind of one of those gray areas. It's with a lot of copyright cases, it's clear, like, whoever has, like, more money, more sophistication usually prevails.
So what should like, writers, what should our students do to kind of protect themselves at the level that most of them are at right now? Is it something they even need to worry about? Should they be registering, for example, as they're working on their thesis novels here, should they be registering their copyright?
So that's a good question. Now, I can't give out like any like legal
I
advice at all.
understand.
Yeah. So this is all just kind of like informational. So if they're thinking about publishing it, they can they can register it. Now, these are not going through like the ETD system. Those are not, these are separate from that, these creative MFA theses,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, I don't know what the ETD system is.
Okay, all right. Yeah, so there is for some of the programs, there's a requirement that they publish. And
Uh,
those come from ProQuest, and I think there's an opportunity to pay a fee, and then ProQuest takes care of registering your copyright for you.
okay, yeah, no,
Um,
we don't do
yeah.
that. But I
No,
mean,
yeah.
in the traditional publishing world, of course, the model has always been that the publisher does take care of copyright. I mean, they register the copyright on behalf of the author in the author's name. Um, and that's just part of the service that they provide as your publisher. In the self-publishing world, then I assume I don't have direct experience in that, but I'm assuming that in that case, it's up to the writer to secure the copyright registration, unless they're working through, some kind of hybrid publisher who is going to do that for them, much as a traditional publisher would.
That's, yeah, so you might run into a situation where it might be in your best interest to consider registering it yourself.
Mhm.
If you have, any questions about what like a smaller independent publisher might do you have a question, Melissa?
Oh, Melissa, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Oh, you're muted.
I'm sorry.
There
Such a rookie mistake. I wanted to ask a question on behalf of one of our students, Kat Fox, who asks, but you do need to register your work to achieve copyright protections if you pursue legal action. Yes or no?
Yes. Yes, you do. So yeah, a few times that you definitely want to register your work is if you before you bring a suit, you absolutely have to. That's the one condition that you do have to. But if you're going to be publishing it, you might want to. Otherwise, you can always put. It doesn't have to be registered in order to put a copyright statement on the work, and so you can do that, and you can put all you can put any kind of statement on there about copyright, and then you can put your email address on there if you think that you want them to contact you. You could look at the Creative Commons licenses too.
Right. And that's something that's very popular with self-published writers. It's interesting because there are all of these. I guess there's a couple things that I wanna mention. I mean, first of all, there's this complicated kind of legal framework that writers need to be cognizant of, and perhaps even participate in if they want to, for example, register copyright on their own work. Let's say, for example, that they want to register copyright on their work prior to sending it to an agent or prior to sending it to a publisher. I feel as though, based on what I know about the publishing industry, most agents and publishers would look askance at that. They would feel that an issue of trust had been breached somehow. It's like these protections are there, but it's almost like a kind of, so to speak, gentleman's agreement that you're not going to really avail yourselves of them because we're going to do that for you, right?
Okay. Oh, so that's kind of the tradition with that industry.
And I guarantee you that if an agent receives a manuscript that has, like, title page and then underneath the little copyright symbol and the author's name, they're going to roll their eyes at that and say, "Oh, amateur," because no professional writer will do that. But the truth of the matter is that nobody knows why. These are just like the traditions that have been, perpetuated across the years. But once you start thinking about it, especially with the information that you're providing us with today, you kind of have to ask yourself, well, why wouldn't I want to copyright my work? Because that is a tangible protection that all of these, so to speak, gentlemen's agreements don't really offer. It doesn't seem like, anyway.
No, and you could get somebody from outside of the industry who behaves differently,
right,
around your tradition. If they're not aware of it, or if they aim to disrupt it.
Yes.
So I guess if you wanted to, possibly the safest route would be to copyright it and then don't put a notice on there.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to. Yeah, the notice and the registration are not at all tied to each other.
Right. And then when your publisher is ready to publish and they're going to get the copyright for you, you just say, "Don't bother. I already took care of it."
Yeah.
And nobody's gonna. They're not gonna terminate your contract at that point. One other thing I want to mention is like, and I'm mentioning this because I know this is a concern of students, and Melissa, I'm sure you've encountered this with your students as well, especially students who are coming into the program in, introduction to creative, to the MFA 505 or other courses, they might be concerned about the whole workshopping process. My work is going to be seen by other students, and it's apt to be stolen by some of these students. Now, you've already put some of that, Ellen, to rest with the idea that an idea is not copyrightable anyway. But I want to just speak out to reassure anybody who is a student here and has had those kind of concerns, that I have never seen that happen. Absolutely never here at SNHU anyway. I'm sure it could happen elsewhere, maybe. But what about you, Melissa? Is that something that you've encountered?
I've encountered concern
Yeah.
from students, but I have never seen theft of a manuscript. No.
I think I find that when students come into an MFA program, it's not because they're trying to harvest ideas from other people. It's because they are overflowing with ideas. They have too many ideas of their own to bother, trying to steal something from somebody else. And obviously there are student conduct rules in place at SNHU that would come down very hard on anybody that did in fact try to take another person's work and pass it off on their own.
Well, and there's such a digital paper trail these days. I mean, that just, I don't think you could get away with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very true. And if somebody did lift whole sentences of creative description and use them wholesale, then that would rise to the
That's
level
plagiarism.
of copyright infringement.
And that's from SNHU's perspective, that's plagiarism, and you would be subject to to harsh sanctions from the university.
Oh yeah, and if the university looked the other way on this, you could, you might consider, including SNHU in a lawsuit as well, because you might say well, they encouraged that type of behavior, and now my work got stolen.
And
but
that's
I think
why
that's
why that does not happen, because
it's not going to happen though. Yeah, because even if if we were all to say sit down and write some haiku about some flowers, they'd all be so radically different from one another.
Yeah, Michael,
haiku is about the only thing I can write these days, so it's always my example.
Michael makes a good point that the very act of putting your work up in classes for workshopping creates proof that you are the author of that work.
There you go. It's actually, so at that point, your work has been fixed in a tangible medium. So that's, Michael, you're absolutely right in that. And people, and they don't want to steal. Nobody wants to trash their reputation.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you this, because I know that you yourself were a writer at one point, and you also have worked in publishing. You worked in magazine publishing. Now you're an archivist. One of my favorite novels in the last couple of years is a speculative fiction novel, kind of a post-apocalyptic novel called Archivist Wasp, and it's about, I mean, it's somebody who's going around performing archival duties that are probably not quite what you're doing. It involves killing ghosts and kind of absorbing their information about the past world. But still, I think archivist is just a very cool title. So, but I get what I'm asking is can you talk a little bit about your pathway from being a writer, then getting into publishing, and then getting into archival work in library science, just because I think it's important for our students to know that we teach our students a lot of different skills that will help them pursue a freelance career, or a multitude of freelance careers that will help support their writing. But we don't teach them about library science, and we don't teach them about all of the various jobs that are related to library science, which are absolutely right up the alley of any writer. I mean, what could be a better job than to be surrounded by books like that? So what was your pathway?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I graduated with the intention of going into the publishing industry. I'd been working for a magazine, and I really wanted to stay in that field. And it was the worst time to join the publishing industry. There was a really bad recession going on. A lot of jobs were just getting lost, just left and right. So I ended up going into marketing instead. And I did like a lot of writing of like for software companies where I wrote like newsletters and like promotional type stuff. Then I kind of missed the arts. So I ended up going back into the arts. I worked for the Nashua Symphony Association. So I was like I was the executive assistant. So I would sometimes do a little bit of writing, business proposals for donors that we were courting and things like that, put together brochures. And then at some point I decided I started volunteering for my public library. I always loved libraries. So I
Yay,
started
libraries.
yeah. So I saw a little thing like in our local paper, they were looking for library volunteers. So what they were actually looking for is they were looking for somebody to run the Friends of the Library. So and host like large pancake breakfasts.
Ooh.
So I got into fundraising for the library. But then I was really interested in going to library school. I'd kind of been thinking about it for a few years anyway. So I kind of knew a few people in the library world at that point. So somebody got me a part-time job working for UNH Law which is an academic law library. And then I started going to library school from there. And then, I ultimately ended up back in publishing, I feel, because what I do now, what a lot of libraries are doing is there's institutional repositories. We have the academic archive, which is where the MFA papers will go, along with some other university publications. The ETD theses I was telling you about, they are in there as well. So there's the libraries are they've been tasked to like publish a lot of material. So we even publish like journals. We're not publishing any here right now, other than within the library. SNHU does publish, a number of journals and other serials, but the library is increasingly getting involved in publishing.
Mhm.
And we have like marvelous platforms and wonderful tools. We know how to set up publications so that they're trackable through the years. Particularly if you want to do something in a serialized fashion, like a journal, you really want to know how to set that up correctly from the start, and how to store it properly. So that's kind of been my path here. It was kind of a little bit, I did a lot of things with my writing degree before I ended up.
And you do a lot of writing in your current role as well.
I do, yes. Yeah, like I was telling you, I actually was writing some case studies earlier today. I've been investigating copyright laws of different countries.
Mhm.
My goal is to write one for every country that SNHU has a campus in. We have campuses around the world, like on a number of refugee camps. We have a campus in Rwanda.
Wow.
Yeah, Rwanda, somewhere in the Middle East. It's escaping me now. And then we have the ones in Mexico, not on a refugee camp, but we are teaching programs in Mexico and Colombia as well. And those programs are taught in Spanish.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting, Melissa?
Yeah,
I had no
I
idea
had
about
no idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We have almost like 200,000 students worldwide.
Mhm.
A lot of
Wow.
students. They're under different like units though, right?
Right.
So
Right.
where, they're not all like in Southern New Hampshire University as we recognize it. They have their own catalogs and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But we want them all to come to the next Wireside chat.
Yeah.
Right? I know. And they can, because they're,
That's right.
yeah. Which is
That's
a
right.
really nice thing about online.
So, does the library have anything to do with the publication of the Penman Review, or is that something that takes place elsewhere?
That takes place elsewhere. So the Penman Review, it looks like they have their own website.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know what they're hosting it on underneath. There is, the Literary Journal, or the older version of the Literary Journal, is on a WordPress site.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that most of the students attending today know about the Penman Review, which is the Southern New Hampshire University literary magazine, basically. And it's a great venue for you to submit your work, to get into the habit of submission. I think getting into that habit is one of the most important things that a writer can do. One of the most important things in achieving success as a writer is submitting your work. And I want to encourage everybody to get in to kind of begin to establish that habit now, by submitting to the Penman Review. Every fall, there's a fiction contest. That's I believe you are all eligible to submit to, and there are some prizes and scholarships and things like that. And it's a credit you can be proud of, I think, to be published in the Penman Review. All right, Kat. Second rejection from the Penman Review. Rejections are important. I think if you look at submission as being part of the job of a writer, then rejections are really kind of to be celebrated in a way, because they show that you're doing your job. And I mean, I know they're painful too. I still get rejected more than accepted, I have to admit, and I've never quite gotten used to it. I just don't, fundamentally understand why others don't recognize my genius, but there it is, the facts speak for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, I developed a very thick skin around my writing. And I think it had to do with a lot of the types of writing that I did, that I never had the opportunity to publish something that was creative. But lots and lots of like marketing type writing, journalism style writing, and just having, my boss sit there and be like, no, like, what? No. And like having my grammar get corrected. Yeah. And now it will happen. It doesn't happen here. But I think as the academic style kind of lends itself, it's a little different. But yeah, get things back with your grammar fixed. It's just kind of a harsh feeling, if you yeah.
No, I mean, it's writing is such an odd profession or pursuit, because on the one hand, there are very few pursuits that involve getting your ego kicked as consistently as writing, and yet it requires an ego, right, to keep doing it in the face of that. So it's a kind of a weird paradox. Melissa, I know you can't possibly be getting work back that has grammar mistakes pointed out by an editor, do you?
No, not grammar mistakes.
But
say,
Melissa,
well, you're a professional writer. I'm a librarian.
Yeah, I taught grammar for so long.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and watched a lot of Schoolhouse Rock videos.
That was so important.
Yeah, but definitely yes on the rejection. I mean, I sent out query letters just the other day for a magazine article that I want to write, and I got 5 rejections on that, and then 1 acceptance, which is good, because I can only really publish it in 1 place.
Right. It only takes 1. Right. That's all it takes. But unfortunately, you have to go through sometimes quite a few rejections to get to that 1, and that's the dispiriting part.
Yeah, it was brutal.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: what do you do in the face of that kind of rejection to keep your spirits up, to keep submitting, to say to yourself, there is something valuable in this piece of writing, even though it's been rejected by 10 people?
I've been in this game for so long. It's been 20 years. And in that time, I've realized there's an editor for everything. There is a magazine for every article or essay. There's an editor for every novel. And so I just persevere until I find that perfect match. Sometimes it takes 2 years and it's always worth it. In the meantime, I always have several queries out. So I'm not too desperately married to any one query. And that helps. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, because that spreads the pain out a little bit.
Yes, exactly. By the way, I put 2 links in the chat for everybody. One is in terms of plagiarism, an excellent article from the New York Times titled "Who's the Bad Art Friend?"
Oh,
that just rocked the literary world last
Yes.
year. Such a good read. And the other is a TED Talk by a man talking about how he invited rejection. I think he tried to get 100 rejections, and he's so funny and so charming about all the different things he asked, hoping to get rejections to sort of give himself a thicker skin. So those are both in the chat.
That has a kind of George Costanza-like genius to it. But I mean, I'm going to tell a very quick story just to illustrate the value of this, of what Melissa's talking about. I knew a editor, a science fiction editor, Gardner Josua, was the editor of Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine. And another friend of mine, Gardner lived in Philadelphia. That's where he did all his editing work, even though the magazine's based in New York. Another friend of mine was good friends with him, also lived in Philadelphia. He used to go over to his house every once in a while on a regular, more or less regular basis, just pop in, see how he's doing. Over the years, there got to be this kind of joke between them because this one guy was constantly submitting stories to Asimov's science fiction. And Gardner would be, reading, you won't believe the latest thing from this guy. And he would read it aloud and they'd all laugh. And months, years go by. And finally, one day, my friend comes in and Josua looks a little dejected. And my friend's like, well, what is it? He says, well, remember so-and-so, this author? Yeah. Well, I don't know if he got better or if he just wore me down, but I bought one of his stories. And I don't think, it matters whether he got better or he wore him down. The point is that he sold a story to one of the top science fiction magazines in the country. And that is, solely because he persisted. And it kind of gets to what you said as well, Melissa, that there's an editor out there for every story. Now, Gardner didn't realize that he was going to be that editor, but he was. I love that story because it's realistic, but also hopeful.
Are there questions in the chat that I have missed?
I thought I saw one. Somebody's asking about a suggestion.
Let's see.
Right. Kat asked if you run into any copyright issues. I think Kat meant taking suggestions from classmates on Annotate or, a similar.
So incorporating those suggestions into your story, for example.
So, one thing to know about joint authorship in the United States copyright law is that each author has the same amount of rights. If it's a work of joint authorship and you can't separate, it's not like one person wrote a chapter, another person wrote another chapter, but the work is one, then like author number 1 can monetize it in one way, author number 2 can also monetize it in the other way. They both own copyright to 100% of the work.
But that's not something that would apply to a workshop situation where one writer is offering suggestions and another writer decides, oh, that makes perfect sense. I'm going to incorporate that suggestion in my own way into my work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would not rise to the level of joint authorship. But say if you really, say as you were like working with somebody, like the project, evolved into something that was a joint work. So they say with joint works that you probably want to have your agreements in place before
Yeah,
you go too far,
that makes
so that you
perfect
don't end
sense.
up in a dispute. Just because the way that joint authorship works in this country is interesting.
Melissa, have you ever been a ghostwriter?
Oh gosh, no. Sorry. No. I think I have too much ego.
So I also have a lot of ego, but I also at one point was desperate for money. So I have been a ghostwriter, and the way that ghostwriting kind of intersects with copyright law is sort of interesting because I obviously can't name names or anything, but I created and wrote a novel that appeared under somebody else's name, and yet even though all of those activities would normally be enough to establish my copyright to that material, I did not have any copyright. I had no right to that material at all because I had signed it away. Um, and I did that for, for money. um, but that was, that was the terms of the contract, that I would have no right to, assert authorship and so on and so forth. And, I had a sum up front that paid me for essentially, I guess, for selling my copyright to somebody else. I guess that must have been it.
Yeah, so work for hire too,
Yeah,
typically.
and that's what
Yeah.
it was.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, that's what it was. It was a work for hire arrangement.
Yeah, and in your case, it was contracted work, so you
Yeah,
definitely had the terms spelled out. But for regular employees, so those case studies that I was describing that I wrote, the copyright in those belongs to Southern New Hampshire University. It doesn't belong to
right,
me at all.
right.
Yeah.
And I
Um,
know also worked in my desperate past for comic books. I wrote a series for DC Comics, and I mentioned that because comic books have kind of had a big impact on copyright law, and the way in which creators retain some right to the characters that they create. Because it used to be, Ellen, more just exactly how you described. If you were working for Marvel, either as an employee or in a work for hire situation, any any superhero you created would belong to Marvel or would belong to DC. You have no right whatsoever to any profits, any share of the profits, or anything. And it wasn't until really like the 70s that you started to see creators insist upon their right to the characters that they created and which had made those comic book companies so much money. And now, like when I was working for DC Comics, I retained a share in the characters that I created, so that if they're ever used again, I would receive some portion of whatever profits there were. Of course, those characters have never been used again. That's one way that the comic book companies can kind of get around that. But somebody like Neil Gaiman, I assume, does very well with his share of the profits of characters that he created, and certainly Alan Moore and creators of that stature also do very well.
have you ever had to do any rights reversion type work to get the rights to something you sold away back?
Yes, in fact, I just did that. My agent for many years had been trying to get back the rights to my second novel, which my publisher HarperCollins was holding on to, um, because the contract for that novel was kind of signed in a kind of a weird period where like ebooks were just starting to come onto the scene, and nobody really understood what impact they were going to have, or how they were going to function from a legal standpoint. Like, for example, in most rights reversion clauses in a contract, the publisher has the right, if you ask for the rights to your book back, because when you sell a book to a publisher, you're basically more or less renting them your copyright. Your copyright stays with you, but they have control over it. But if they're not doing certain things that are spelled out in your contract to promote your book, or a certain amount of time has passed, or sales figures fall below a certain threshold, or some combination of all of that, then you can ask for the rights to you can ask for your copyright back. And there are certain conditions set out that, for example, you ask for your copyright back, and the publisher says, I'm going to bring your book back in print. And then that's what they do, and they have the right to do that. But where do ebooks come in? Because ebooks they never go out of print. As long as you have an ebook for sale somewhere, it's in print. So that was the loophole that enabled not just me, but many, many writers to have their books kind of held hostage, more or less, by their publishers. And after a long struggle, I did finally, just like a couple months ago, get the rights back to my second novel, Tumbling After.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Paul, what will you do with that book?
Well, I now have the rights back to all of my books except for my most recent novel, which I only sold in the UK. So I still own the US rights to that. And I would like to, self-publish them, because I haven't been able to find a traditional publisher for them. So that's the next step for me.
Wait, so the one that your second novel, the one that HarperCollins published, you're going to self-publish that?
I would like to.
Would you self-publish it under a different title?
No.
Are you allowed to tweak the manuscript?
Sure.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, because I have the rights. I mean, I own that manuscript now. It's completely mine. And in fact, my first novel, I have revised that. And when that comes out, the self-published edition of that comes out, it will be, a revised edition of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. Mike, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to read the same question that you were. Go ahead.
Go for it.
Okay, so Michael says, I have something that I wrote for hire a few years ago, and the company has seized since. So I don't really know what I can do with it now. And that's a really great question. And I don't know, Ellen, what do you think? What happens in a situation like that?
That is, so I'd want to know, like, did they sell their, their property and their intellectual property, what kind of company it was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were there debtors who assumed copyrights as part of the property of the company? That's a sticky legal situation. You got to get the lawyers involved at that point, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, the library actually holds, it's kind of for business students, but they hold research workshops on how to conduct like business research.
Mm-hmm.
So also a good idea if you're looking for background material for your, for writing creatively. But yeah, you're like, everyone's welcome to like go to any topics that are being presented on, even if they're not necessarily for your field. So that would be a really good one. I would definitely get in touch with someone in the library.
Yeah, what I'm thinking would be a great thing to do would be to partner with the library for a webinar, or maybe have somebody else here, word for word, Wireside chat, who could kind of talk to us about what do writers need to know for researching their fiction, and how the library or various databases accessible through the library can be useful to writers for that, because I think a lot of writers don't understand the full range of research materials and resources that are at their disposal. I mean, here at SNHU, but just in general, like how do I fill the gaps that I need to fill in order to make my story authentic?
Oh yeah, there's some great research out there. The Federal Reserve banks put out really, really interesting publications. There's the National Bureau of Economic Research puts out stuff. There's medical research out there. There's medical research publications out there that are geared for consumers and non-medical professionals. There's like a lot of really, really good research that comes out of the federal government in particular, and the Federal Reserve Bank, which is not part of the government, but similar.
Well, I'm going to pursue that, and maybe you can be a part of it, Ellen, too. That we'll try to work something out for that will help writers, that will give our students a firmer grasp on how to research, and then we can also talk, of course, about incorporating that research into fiction, which is kind of another kettle of fish.
Yeah.
That has its own challenges.
And another really good career path too is if you can write like these types of business reports, like business analysts on Wall Street, people who can do forecasting. If you are familiar with just something a little bit outside of your own like creative sphere, like learn a little bit about licensing, for example, so you know how the license works, or learn a little bit about, take a basic economics class or two so you can write, really good business reports, or take a software class so you can write software manuals. And those can also be the sorts of things that can provide a really good income and your writing, but it'll still hopefully give you the, freedom in your personal life to pursue your creative stuff.
Yeah. I mean, Melissa, that is basically what you do, isn't it?
Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do a blend of journalism and fiction writing. Yeah.
And teaching.
And teaching and parenting, and yeah.
And coaching, running the running team.
Right. Does anybody else have questions?
Yeah, do we have any other questions? We're kind of coming up to the last 10 minutes or so of our chat. So I wonder if I can just kind of open people's cameras up. Am I allowed to do that?
I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, I don't think I can. I thought I could. Maybe I could.
Students can turn their cameras on if they want to, right?
I'm not sure they can, but I think I can do it. I can do it for them. So if anybody would like to do that, just raise your hand, and then I'll turn your camera and your mic on. I can do that.
Everybody was just being shy.
No, I shut everybody down, but now I can't turn them all back on. The law of unintended consequences.
Oh no. I know we talked about this a bit, but Michael said in the chat that a Wireside chat on researching would be really useful. And this just came up in my thesis 2 course. We're talking about research in both historical fiction and in speculative fiction, particularly science fiction. So that would be a really cool Wireside chat.
Yes, it would. I mean, yeah, I would love to do that. I'm fascinated by, I write a lot of historical fiction, but I also write speculative fiction. So I have to do both of those kinds of research.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but for anybody who writes historical fiction, there was a great NPR interview on today with Karen Joy Fowler, who just wrote
I love her.
Booth, about John Wilkes Booth. And
yes.
She was talking about what to include and what to leave out, and how much she had to speculate on, and all the different research that was available on the Booth family. It was fascinating. I'll put a link.
I actually just swapped out the stories in MFA 505. So there used to be a story there. Who was that by? I'm blanking on the writer's name, but anyway, I put in a story by Karen Joy Fowler. Because it was time for something new, but I'm also just a big fan of her work.
Oh yeah. I'll put the link in the chat.
Excellent. Nancy, I see that you said I can turn my camera on, only that organizers can unmute us. Do you want me to unmute you? Do you have a question you'd like to ask on camera?
Do it, Nancy.
I'm happy to do it. I'd like to test it out anyway.
If this is the Nancy I'm thinking of, Nancy's
but you
not
don't
sure.
have to do it if you don't want to. So what else? Does anybody else have copyright questions for archivist Ellen?
I do. Oh yeah, go for it, Amber. I'll ask.
Go ahead,
you.
Amber. I'm going to, yep, I'm trying to put you on the camera right now. Let's see. All right, Amber, you should be ready to go. It looks like you're muted, but your camera should be. All right, obviously I have to research this a little bit further. I apologize, Amber. I don't think I can. But if you have a question, meanwhile, I'll answer Kat's question or pass Kat's question on to Ellen. Do smaller publishers typically handle copyright registration, or does it just depend?
So you were saying that they typically the larger ones definitely will.
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
and even a lot of the like hybrid publishers that handle a lot of the kind of more onerous tasks of publishing will do that as well. Sometimes they charge a fee for it, which is not cool in my opinion, but I guess everybody has to make a living somehow.
Oh, how much do they charge? They charge like well beyond because it's not very expensive. Is it difficult to register it yourself? I mean, I've never done that.
No, it's not. It's just kind of tedious.
Okay. Oh, you have to go through. Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that.
And
yeah,
I mean,
I put a copyright statement on my stuff, but no registration.
it's not super expensive, but it is, it's not peanuts either. It adds up if you're copywriting, more than a couple of works, and of course you also have to get your your ISBN numbers, and those are not free either.
Oh, that I thought that I see that's something I definitely thought the publisher did was the
Yeah, they do.
ISBN number. Oh, they do.
They do.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But do they charge you back for that then?
No, not a traditional publisher, but again, the self-publishing is kind of the Wild West, and you really have to be on your toes as a writer, not to be taken advantage of. So let me ask answer another question here. Will agents, publishers prefer to get queries of uncopyrighted work? Well, in the sense that Ellen was describing, that anything that you fix in a tangible form, I can't remember exactly how you phrased it. So
Medium.
If you send a manuscript to a publisher, that work is copyrighted. It's already copyrighted. You own the copyright in that work, even if you haven't registered the copyright. So what agents prefer to see is unpublished work.
Wow, there's some great questions coming in.
Yeah, now they're coming in. So, Ellen, what happens when a manuscript is submitted to copyright, when you try to register your copyright with the Library of Congress? How do they know that you're not trying to register something that's already copyrighted? What kind of due diligence do they do, if any?
So I believe they do less and less.
Yeah.
They no longer require you to deposit it. So initially the idea was that the Library of Congress would have one copy of each book
of everything.
that was published.
That's right. I forgot about that.
And that's just crazy to think about, right? They pick and choose what they're going to put in, and certainly what they're going to get on, in print.
Yeah.
It's probably very select at this point.
Well, there's only so much space, I mean, good grief.
Yeah. But libraries still do buy stuff in print if it's worthwhile.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so they can't even electronically track.
Yeah.
what they need. They're definitely, we were looking at storage for the archives, and I was like, well, they're like, what do you need? I'm like, well, I need like 15 terabytes now. And I think I want 5 to 10 terabytes a year going
Yeah.
forward. They were
Wow.
like, oh, they were like, we didn't think you needed like, that kind of storage. I'm like, you need a lot of storage.
Yeah. A terabyte here and a terabyte there, and pretty soon you're
Yeah.
talking about real storage.
Exactly. Yeah. We have like old movies and stuff. So
So what else? What other questions do we have here? I follow a few self-pubbed authors who have been accused recently of plagiarism. Does having the copyright registration help in those cases, or is this something that only having a lawyer can help with?
I think, if you're on record as having it, it definitely, you're on record that you have published it, or that you have copyrighted it by that date. You've definitively fixed it in the tangible medium. It's a complete work by the time you're copywriting it, most likely. So that's one of the things about copyright law is a lot of times it is like whoever puts up a better defense and whoever has a better lawyer.
And I mean, let's face it, a lot of these kind of cases may never come before a court of law, but they are nevertheless, they're kind of fought in the courtroom of Twitter, and in that case, no lawyers can help you. No copyright can help you, because people will say what they want, and they'll come up with their whatever explanations they choose to explain your copyright away. I think that's just the reality right now.
Yeah, and then like you have to wonder, like, what are you not writing while you're embroiled in a copyright or a plagiarism dispute?
Yeah.
And who might not want to work with you?
Well, there's damage to your reputation for sure. Hey, I know we're coming to the end here, and before we go, I want to just give a shout out to Kat, who wrote here. I have a small publisher who's very interested in my thesis novel already. I think that's just awesome. Congratulations. And I wish you every success with that.
Very nice.
And I'm getting to read that thesis novel right now. It's fantastic.
Oh, are you? Is Kat in your class? Okay, yeah. That's great. Awesome. Yeah. That's fantastic. You should consult. And actually, Mike, I'm glad you mentioned that. Yes, you should consult a lawyer, but publishing law is its own weird thing. And if you go to like, your aunt, who happens to be a successful, real estate lawyer or some high-powered corporate lawyer, they will not be able to help you with their publishing law, because the terms of art are so arcane and have been developed in a kind of like, case of like separate evolution from other types of law, that you really need a publishing lawyer in order to navigate, anything having to do with copyright or your whatever contract a publisher might offer you. Another lawyer will either miss stuff that they should have caught, and or will fixate on things that are meaningless.
It's very true. They don't teach that in the general law programs. So plug for a local school here. UNH Law is one of the top 10 law schools in the country for intellectual property. They were founded in like the 70s, but they have always been in the top 10 for IP and copyright.
Yeah.
Mostly patents. Yeah.
So, folks, we have hit the 9 o'clock mark. This has been a great discussion. Ellen, thank you so much for joining us. And Melissa, I'm glad you made it. Thank you as always. You are the most awesome co-host.
Thank you.
And I want to thank all of our students for making time on a Monday evening to join us and learn a little bit about copyright. We'll see you next time, I hope.
Thank you, Ellen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. It was really nice to meet you, Melissa, and nice to meet you, Paul.
Yep.
Yeah. So anyone who has any questions, feel free. I'm going to put I'll put my email address in the
that'd be
chat.
Great.
Yeah. And in the fall, we're going to do a whole series of workshops.
Oh, that's really awesome. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're
Well-
going to try to do one for copyright. We're going to try to do like different types of creative works, visual arts, performing arts. So we might try to do one just for writers if we.
We'd love that. And
Yeah.
we'll do everything we can to help you. Just
Awesome.
feel free to call on us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to
All
end
right.
the recording here, folks. Good night, everybody.
Okay. Good night. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much, Ellen.
You're welcome. Take care, Paul.
Yep. Bye-bye.